Hi everyone and welcome back to my top 500 games. We are currently at number 223 and that is Tales from Space Mutant Blobs Attack. Strange, I would have thought it would have been called Mutant Blob Attacks, considering that it is about there being one blob attacking, but whatever. It's a title I've gotten confused about quite often, to be honest with you. But this is a game that I played in 2012, I believe it was. I believe it was just before I got my new TV, the new 32-inch one that I started with Voodoo Dice on it, if you remember me mentioning. And this game is basically the sequel to Tales from Space about a blob, and I've played this one more. I have actually completed this one. Although I played this one on the Vita. That might be why I played it at the time, because I was waiting to get a new TV, maybe. Either way, one main improvement over this game is that you don't have to hold down a button to eat the different items around you. It just happens because really you have no reason not to. But also, this game took advantage of some of the Vita's features, which I know is in most cases a bad thing, but it actually did them pretty well. It wasn't just gimmicky, just using things for the sake of doing things. They actually did use the touchscreen pretty well. There were moments where you had to use the touchscreen to move obstacles around and stuff, and it wasn't just a case of, here, let's use the Vita screen because, hey, look at this technology, we can do this. But at the same time, it never clashed with your ability to play the game. There was always a bit of lenience. There was always enough lenience for you to be able to do that. But yeah, I will reiterate the premise again here. The premise is basically that you are this blob and you have to take over the world by eating things and getting bigger and bigger. And eventually you will destroy the universe by becoming this gigantic blob and eating the sun. So yeah, there's that happy fun time game. Number 222 is Sound Shapes. This is another game that I played on the Vita, although it's also available on PS3 and it's also available on PS4 as well. Although saying that, Mutant Blobs Attack is now also available on PS3, but it wasn't at the time that I played it. But this is a very solid platformer, I'd say. When I say solid, I don't mean solid as in like it's really good. But it's solid as in everything's all about very specific levels and doing things very accurately within the assigned levels. Or at least it gets to that point when you get to the death stages. The way that it works is that you are this weird little blob thingy. I know this sounds like it's very similar, but it isn't. And you stick to walls. But if you hold down the R button, you will lose your stick and you will speed up and you will roll a lot faster, which is what you need to do sometimes in order to be able to jump across large gaps. But you need to make sure not to hit the bad areas, because if you do, you will lose. And so you've got all these levels to do, one after the other, and eventually you unlock the death stages, and the death stages are basically just very small levels where you'll have to collect X amount of these little tokens and they'll keep randomly appearing throughout the level. It is kind of luck based, it's just a case of keep at it until you do it properly, I suppose. But it does get very frustrating when you keep failing over and over again, and you have to be very precise. But sometimes you have to hope that you will enter a level where the icons just so happen to appear right next to each other. And it will be that you collect one and then another one will appear, and you have to collect that one and you have to keep going until you collect so many. After that there are the beat schools, which are kind of silly. It's basically just a little rhythm and you have to try to put in the markers on the grid to mark where the beats are in the rhythm, and if you do it correctly you win the round. It's really not much to it, but most of it is DLC, to be honest. Number 221. Now, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but I'm going to pronounce how I think it's pronounced. Söldner-X 2 Final Prototype. This is a game by SideQuest Studios, an indie developer based in Germany, and this is basically a side-scrolling shooter. The way that it works is you have a series of levels and you can press the L and R buttons to switch between different weapons, and what I do like about this game is that when you shoot and you hit the enemies, you do see the damage number, so you can see the variance in power between the different types of weapons. Also, hidden within each level is a set amount of keys, and some of them are really hard to find. Some of them are easy and you'll just stumble across them naturally, but some of them are really hard. And there is sort of like this leveling system within the game, but it seems pretty weak. It doesn't seem to make that much difference overall, but it is a decent game. I would recommend it. Number 220 is a game called Aero Racer. Now, this is another one of the PS Minis. That is one of the little games that you can get for the PSP or the PS3 and you can transfer between them. And the best parallel I can give to this would be something like Wipeout on Micro Machines. It's certainly got that Wipeout feel to it, but it's also got that top-down view that Micro Machines does have. And it has a really nice colour scheme as well, this game. I don't know if this colour scheme was influenced by anything, even if it was influenced by something just like Micro Machines, where you have the very distinctively differently coloured cars. Probably just the fact that it's a top-down view, and otherwise you wouldn't really get too much viewing of them. But you do get this little trail of light as you race through the levels. But the main thing that I remember about this game, and the main thing that I really liked about this game, was that you could use ramps to speed you up, and ramps were rather strange because it was a top-down view. You could kind of see by the different gradients where there was a ramp, and it's something that's hard to describe, but if you play it you sort of get a feel for it. So if you drive closer to the edges you speed up, but by doing so you put yourself at more danger. So that was very interesting. Number 219 is Mod Nation Racers Road Trip. This is the PS Vita version, and I played this through, I believe I got this through PS Plus, and that's how I managed to get it. It is basically a kart racing game. It's the medium molecule kart racing game basically, and as well as having your kart racing weapons, stuff like that you would expect, you also can do different tricks, different spinny tricks and stuff in order to be able to increase your boost. One thing that really sticks out to me about this game, that was a big feature that they promoted when they really started the whole Mod Nation Racers thing, is the whole creating a track editor. I had some fun with that, trying to make a track and trying to make things go over and under each other, and you get to play around with scenery, even though to me that wasn't too much of a big deal, but it's still fun to mess about with, I guess, and play with that. Number 218 is Miscrit's Sunfall Kingdom. Now this is a strange one because this is a Facebook game, and I went through a period of time where I was discovering Facebook games and I was looking up to see what games there were on Facebook. And of course, as we all know, that most of them are rubbish. We all know the stereotypical thing of, you know, people constantly bugging other people to do things for them so they can get more of this game. So that, you know, it's the whole advertise our game feature of these Facebook games. But I don't really remember much of that in particular in Miscrits. But Miscrits was sort of like this lower scale Pokemon in a way, that you do go out and you do have to try to catch these monsters, the monsters that are called the Miscrits. And they did change the system as time went on, because when I started playing it, it was that you as a player leveled up, you had your own level, and when you leveled up you collected these orange plus symbols, and you could use those to level up your Miscrit individually. The aim of the game, like the ultimate aim I suppose, was to catch them all, and I know there's the Pokemon parallel just glaring right there, but you have all of these different Miscrits and you can, for lack of a better word, evolve them into these newer versions. And when the game started, or at least when I started playing it, there were 3 different elements and it had the whole rock, paper, scissors thing, which it was something like, you know, fire, water and grass. But later on they introduced 3 more elements, which would have been, I believe, wind, electric and earth. And I don't remember exactly how the cycle works that way, but the main thing I do remember is that as you level up your Miscrit and as you get more abilities, they start to get more abilities that are more powerful but less accurate, but where the power makes up for the accuracy more so than it does the accuracy detriment the power. So for example, you might have something with a power of 10 with an accuracy of 100%, and then you'll get something with a power of 12 with an accuracy of 90%. So it did get stronger strictly as time went on, but there was of course that balancing factor where you would sometimes want to use the weaker attack for the higher accuracy if the enemy was nearly dead, for example. They also had the system in place where every so many levels you got to choose one of 2 bonuses, but you could sort of never go back to undo that or get a different bonus, which is interesting, but I always like to have a way to be able to go back and get extra bonuses from before, even if there is an extra difficulty to doing that. But they did change the system eventually where your miscrits did individually level up. And what happened was when they leveled up, you could spend points to increase their stats, or you could pay like a premium amount and they would have a stronger level up. So of course you could have a cycle of a miscrit from level 1 to whatever level it can get to, but not have that a good cycle, whereas you can later on get one and have a better cycle of level 1 to max. I don't know if that had anything to do with the free-to-play microtransactions. There's probably something to do with that in there. I do remember microtransactions in this game were more focused on particular items that you could use in battle, like healing items and stuff, but really powerful ones, which is never a good thing. I mean, microtransactions, I'm not going to go on about it again, because I've done so many times, but I can't stop reiterating that I just hate microtransactions. I just hate microtransactions. At number 217, we have Tony Hawk's Underground. Now this is when the Tony Hawk series had finished going through the numbering cycle, so we just had Tony Hawk's 4, and then it decided to start giving them subtitles. So this is Tony Hawk's Underground. Now Tony Hawk games were a series that I was into. Skateboarding games, you know, go around, do tricks, score points, accomplish goals, and so on and so forth. Now Underground was the 5th game in the series, and by this point they had changed up the formula a bit. What they had was, instead of having set levels where you played as a particular skater and did the goals of each level, what you did instead was you created a singular skater and you went through the story of that particular skater, which, to be honest, I preferred just the original method of just having a series of stages and having a different career mode for each character, rather than having the single mode that you just go through. But what I did like about this game was that I liked the way that this game had, and this is gonna sound a bit confusing to some people, I know, because of the use of the word, but this game had grinding. Now, when I say grinding in this case, of course, it has grinding as in, you know, grinding on the rails, because that's what grinding is. But in this context, I mean grinding as in leveling up. Not strictly, so to speak. It wasn't so much that you had to do something over and over so that then you could build up points to spend on things. It was more to do with breaking particular records, and there was a cap put onto it depending on how far through the story you were. So, for example, in order to increase your grinding skill, and I'm talking about the grinding on a rail skill here, in order to increase your grinding skill, you had to grind. And I'm using the word grind in both cases. This is too confusing. You had to grind on the rail in order to get better at grinding on the rail. And the thing is, it wasn't so much grinding in the leveling grinding sense. This is ridiculous. It wasn't like that sort of, you know, repeating it over and over again. It was more so that you had to beat a record. So it would be that you can grind, like your grinding stat is this high, it's 5 points or whatever, and then in order to be able to increase it to 6 points, you have to have a 10-second consecutive grind. Just so that you know what I'm talking about, I'm making up the numbers, but it explains the systems basically. And then once you do that, you'll get your 6th grind stat point. And then the next challenge on the list will be something like grind for 15 seconds continuously. But they placed a cap on how far you could go based on where you were on the story. I don't think that meant that you could accomplish the goal and then have it automatically unlock when you reach the next part of the story. I don't think that's what happened. I think it was just a case of when you hit certain parts of the story, that's when those challenges became available. What this game did that I didn't like, and this is something that started with Tony Hawk's 4, and it's something that I've never liked in Tony Hawk games, it's just things that are not skateboarding. Like, there's one part where you have to drive a car to go somewhere, and there's one point where you have to, like, run across rooftops, and it's just, I don't know why they would do that. Is it to sort of ingrain itself into the skateboarding culture as opposed to just being about the act of skateboarding? I don't know. Number 216 is Tony Hawk's Project 8. I was close to making this a clump, but I think I have enough separate to talk about each of these individual Tony Hawk's games that I wanted to talk about them individually. I wanted to list them separately rather than put them down together as a single clump. Tony Hawk's Project 8 did have grinding. And again, I mean the grinding in the leveling up sense. And what I mean by that is that you did increase your stats based on how much you did a thing rather than just breaking a set record. I also remember about this game that it was all based on one singular map, and I think this was something that they sort of started with American Wasteland, where they advertised it as the whole needing to get rid of the loading screens thing. But I think they just made the game this one map that kept expanding and new areas would open up as you played more. It's a neat idea. I like the idea. But the only thing is I find with this is that when you do this, I find it a lot harder to think about each place as its own unique place because it all has to fit within a particular setting. Like in a Tony Hawk game from before, you could have one level in a city, then you could have another level in a factory somewhere, and you could have another level in Brazil, and it would all make sense because you're traveling to different parts of the world or different parts around the US. But when you have it all together like this, you can't really do that so easily. But even still, I did like the idea behind it. I did like the way that this game was presented. One thing I didn't like, and this is purely just my own experience here, I realise this is not a fault of the game at all, but I played the Xbox 360 version, and to me, Xbox 360 controls are not very good for Tony Hawk games. PlayStation controls are good for Tony Hawk games, and I put that down to the fact that the D-pad is used a lot. At least it is for me. I find that the D-pad is better than the analog stick for Tony Hawk games. Number 215 is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team. Now this is a strange one because I know there was a period of time where I played this quite a lot. Like I would just sit and play it for hours on end, and after that point I just sort of stopped. The main thing I remember though is that you do start off and you choose a Pokemon to be, and you choose a Pokemon to be your companion, and you go through the different stories of all these different randomly generating dungeons, and so it has that roguelike end element, and that is basically what it's meant to be. It doesn't have the whole permadeath thing, but it does have the randomly generated floors, and it does have the different types of Pokemon that you find in the previous game. So, it's a Pokemon game. It's going to be Pokemon themed. So you've got all the different types of Pokemon. One thing that bugged me about this game was that at the beginning of the game, it says, are you male or female? And it says, it's generally what they've started doing in Pokemon games since Crystal, where they say, are you a boy or girl? And so I picked female. But if you do that, what it means is that your status bar on the menu is this garish pink colour, whereas if you pick male, it's a blue colour, and that looks fine. And that's kind of annoying. Like, why would you have to pick one particular gender in order to be able to make your menu look a certain way? I know it's based on stereotypes or something, but I just think that whole pink colour looks pretty nasty, if I'm honest. I just don't like it. I'm not a fan. But my main memory of playing this game is mostly playing it on a train. I was once on a long train journey. I say long, it's like 3 hours or so. And I was just playing this game, listening to Sufjan Stevens on my iPod, and just listening to one song that I got into, and I really, really liked it, called The Mistress Witch from McClure, and I just listened to that song over and over again, and I was sat on the train playing Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team. So, I'm going to end this part here. Thank you all for watching. I will see you all next time, where we will be at number 214. We've almost hit 200. We've almost hit 300 games. Almost in the top 200. Can you believe it? Goodbye.